working to connect a region of over 600 new bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. On tonight's headlines. A suspected Islamic militant suicide bomber killed a police officer and wounded 10 other people in an attack on a police station in the Indonesian city of Bandung. The country's unemployment rate eased in October, reaching its lowest level in 17 years, according to national statistician Dennis Mapa. Preliminary results of the labor force survey show the jobless rate returned to its pre-pandemic level. President Vladimir Putin, who vowed to use all military means to defend Russian territory, said that Moscow would only ever use nuclear weapons in response to an enemy strike. And the Philippines joined the international community in its initiative to provide free and universal access to quality jabs against COVID and other vaccine-preventable diseases. First in our news, a suspected Islamic militant suicide bomber killed a police officer and wounded 10 other people in an attack on a police station in the Indonesian city of Bandung. Wednesday's blast occurred at about 8 a.m. at the Astana Anyer Police Office in Bandung. Take a look.
Yang bersangkutan pernah ditangkap karena peristiwa bom Cicendum dan sempat dihukum 4 tahun di bulan September atau Oktober 2021 yang lalu. Yang bersangkutan bebas. Tentunya bahwa pelaku terafiliasi dengan kelompok JAD Bandung atau JAD Jawa Barat, dan saat ini
Police identified the attacker as 34-year-old Agus Suhatno, who was linked to the pro-Islamic State group Jamaah Ansharut Daulah, or JAD, and had already served 4 years in maximum security prison for his involvement in a 2017 bombing. He was released in September 2021 after serving his sentence for a previous bombing in Bandung. A second device was later found nearby and safely detonated by a police bomb squad. Police also said they had found paper messages attached to the blue motorbike ridden by the attacker. The messages denounced the Indonesian Criminal Code as a product of infidels and urged people to wage a war against law enforcers. Police also found a stack of papers at the scene rejecting a newly passed amendment to the Criminal Code. Some Islamist extremists have called for the implementation of the Sharia law in Indonesia, which officially recognizes 5 religions in addition to Islam. Members of JAD have staged other attacks, including a series of suicide bombings in May 2018 against several churches and a police headquarters in Surabaya, Indonesia's second biggest city. Those attacks, carried out by families including children, killed a dozen people. Indonesia, the world's biggest Muslim-majority nation, has long struggled with Islamist militancy. A 5.8 magnitude earthquake hit Indonesia's main island of Java today with no immediate reports of damage. And this is less than a month after another quake in the same province killed more than 300 people. The quake struck at 07:50 a.m. local time, around 15 kilometers from the town of Cianjur, the epicenter of November's devastating tremor, according to the USGS. It said there was a low likelihood of casualties or damage following the quake, which struck at 123 kilometers. No damage was immediately reported in Cianjur or Sukabumi, the city nearest the epicenter, but schools were temporarily evacuated in Sukabumi. Last month, a shallow 5.6 magnitude earthquake hit Cianjur, triggering landslides and collapsing buildings, killing at least 334 people injuring thousands and leaving tens of thousands more homeless. Save the Children warned this week that evacuees faced a ticking time bomb of disease and infection due to poor living conditions. Thousands of cases of respiratory infections and hundreds of cases of diarrhea have already been reported. Indonesian President Joko Widodo is visiting the area today to distribute aid to affected residents. In other news, a survivor of the 2002 Bali bombings on Thursday said it was laughable to see one of the bomb makers released from an Indonesian prison after serving half his 20-year sentence. Take a look. Umar Patek was a member of an Al-Qaeda-linked group that detonated 2 bombs outside a Bali bar and nightclub in October 2002, killing 202 people, including 88 Australians. Australian attack survivor Peter Hughes, who spoke at Patek's trial in 2012, said the convicted extremist deserved to serve the harshest sentence. Indonesian authorities said they believe Patek had rehabilitated himself inside prison after completing a de-radicalization program. Patek has said he wanted to devote himself to de-radicalization or de-radicalizing other inmates. Australia's Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles urged Indonesia to keep Patek under constant surveillance. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in August said he had nothing but contempt for Patek's actions and that his early release would be traumatic for victims' grieving families. The country's unemployment rate eased in October, reaching its lowest level in 17 years, according to National Statistician Dennis Mapa. Preliminary results of the labor force survey showed the jobless rate returned to its pre-pandemic level. Take a look.
Ninoong Oktubre 2022, ang employed persons o bilang ng mga may trabaho o negosyo ay naitala sa 47.11 million. Ito ay mas mababa ng mga 285,000 kaysa sa naitala noong Hulyo 2022 na nasa 47.39 million. Ang employment rate nitong Oktubre 2022 ay nasa 95.5%. Ito ay tinatayang mas mataas kaysa sa naiulat noong Hulyo 2022 na nasa 94.8% at higit naman na mas mataas kumpara noong Oktubre 2021 na nasa 92.6%. Sa manufacturing, nakikita natin na tumataas yung value production, volume production sa manufacturing. May decrease siya ng mga 58,000. Human health and social work activities, minus 22,000. Accommodation and food service activities because of the return of our domestic tourists and foreign tourists, may bawas na 19,000. So I think yung mga sectors na medyo tumataas din yung kanilang economic activities, dito rin bumababa yung underemployment in terms of numbers. Thank you.
Sir, last na lang po, sa unemployment po kasi matagal na pong bumababa. Pero I think the rate, the month-on-month rate this October, mas mataas po yung binaba. Is this still due to the easing of restrictions or may ibang factors na rin po?
Well, matagal na ito natin nakikita, no? So siguro sabi ko nga, yung ating pag last quarter kasi medyo marami tayong mga economic activities because of the holiday season. So expected naman ito na bumaba yung ating unemployment rate. Nasa 4.5% na lang. And we hope that this will continue, no? Para bumalik na tayo dun sa unemployment rate ng 2019.
According to the Philippine Statistics Authority, October 2022 labor force survey, the country's employment rate improved to 95.5% in October from 95% in the previous month, the highest rate recorded since January last year. In October this year, the PSA said the country's unemployment rate also fell back to pre-pandemic levels at 4.5%, translating to 2.24 million unemployed Filipinos, a decline of 1.26 million from the 3.5 million unemployed reported in October last year. Meanwhile, President Marcos Jr. has admitted that the country's inflation is out of control. However, he remains optimistic that the economy will continue to recover. Take a look.
I'm happy to be able to inform you that the Philippine economy continues to recover from the negative impact of the pandemic. In fact, the country is on track to maintain its strong economic performance and achieve the government's growth target of 6.5 to 7.5% for 2022. Unfortunately, although our growth rate looks healthy, our foreign exchange has become, our peso has become a little stronger relative to the other currencies. Our unemployment rate is quite reasonable considering the situation. However, on the other side of that coin, there is still inflation that is running rampant and out of control. We just received the poor news from the Philippine statistics that November we hit 8%. And we are now trying to identify the areas of the economy that are the main drivers of that inflation. The main drivers of that inflation, unfortunately, are still imported. Imported inflation. So, again, import substitution is still a good idea, not only for foreign exchange reserve, but also so that we can keep our inflation rate down. But I think it is also time to look inwards into the domestic market here and develop our manufacturing capabilities, develop those markets, the local markets, and for that, we need the private sector to come in. As when we talk about manufacturing, we are talking about capital-intensive investments. And that is something that we are hoping will be, again, a driver for our economy in the next few years.
He further said that the government aims to accelerate the country's economic growth by further easing travel and mobility restrictions, implementing economic reforms, and improving economic cooperation with trade and investment partners. The suffering being experienced by millions of civilians across Ukraine must not become the new normal, according to the UN Human Rights Chief. Speaking in the capital, Kiev, after an official 4-day visit to the country, Volker Turk said that the scale of the damage and destruction that he had seen in Izium was shocking. Take a look.
I've spoken to the families of prisoners of war who anxiously await news of their loved ones. I've listened to those who shared the pain of parents whose children are on the front line. I heard about the particular plight of people with disabilities and older people who are unable to reach a safe shelter when the air raid sirens go off. I visited the site of a shelled apartment block in Izium, in Kharkiv Oblast, where more than 50 people were buried under the rubble. And in the rubble were the signs of lives cut short by acts of indiscriminate shelling. Each day we receive information about war crimes. The scale of civilian casualties, as well as the significant damage and destruction to civilian objects, including hospitals and schools, is shocking. And I saw that yesterday myself in Izium. During winter, this has horrible consequences for the most vulnerable. They're struggling with blackouts, with no heating or electricity going on for days. And we have also information that continues to emerge about summary executions, torture, arbitrary detention, enforced disappearances, and sexual violence against women, girls, and men. In relation to continuing reports of ill treatment, torture, and execution of prisoners of war, we are here in Izium at another scene of senseless destruction. You see behind me a multi-story building with signs of life from the past. When the people who lived in this building tried to find shelter, the building collapsed and we found over 50 bodies and we documented them.
The UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission has been in Ukraine since 2014, documenting and reporting with their work, including the monitoring and reporting on all violations committed on the territory of Ukraine, irrespective of the perpetrator. The UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine is also working to corroborate allegations of additional killings in these regions and in parts of Kharkiv and Kherson regions that were recently retaken by Ukrainian forces, according to Mr. Turk. Some were killed cutting firewood or buying groceries, according to the UN rights chief, adding that there were strong indications that the summary executions documented in the report constitute the war crime of willful killing. Meanwhile, Time magazine named President Zelensky as well as the Spirit of Ukraine as its 2022 Person of the Year for the resistance the country has shown in the face of Russia's invasion. Take a look. He has also become the standard bearer of opposition to Russian leader Vladimir Putin, who himself was Time's Person of the Year in 2007. Zelensky's success as a wartime leader has relied on the fact that courage is contagious, according to Simon Schuster. It spread through Ukraine's political leadership in the first days of the invasion, as everyone realized the president had stuck around. His professional instincts derived from a lifetime as an actor on the stage meant he knew how to read a crowd and react to its moods and expectations. Now his audience was the world. He was determined not to let them down. Courage came to define his fellow Ukrainians too. Instead of running for their lives, many Ukrainians grabbed whatever weapons they could find and ran to defend their towns and cities against an invading force armed with tanks and attack helicopters. President Vladimir Putin, who vowed to use all military means to defend Russian territory, said that Moscow would only ever use nuclear weapons in response to an enemy strike. Take a look.
У нас стратегия наша применения средств защиты, а именно как защиту мы рассматриваем оружие массового поражения, ядерное оружие, она вся настроена вокруг так называемого ответно-встречного удара. То есть, когда по нам наносится удар, мы наносим в ответ. По поводу угрозы ядерной войны, Светлана Геннадьевна, вы правы. Такая угроза нарастает, здесь что греха таить. По поводу того, что Россия ни при каких обстоятельствах не применит первый, но если не применит первый, ни при каких обстоятельствах, значит и второй тоже не применит, потому что возможности применения в случае нанесения ядерного удара по нашей территории, они сильно ограничены. Тем не менее, у нас...
Speaking more than 9 months after his forces launched their military operation, Mr. Putin warned the conflict could be lengthy. Moscow had expected the fighting to last just days, but more than 9 months after its forces entered Ukraine, President Putin said its military operation could be a lengthy process. Intense shelling continued along the front in eastern Ukraine, with President Volodymyr Zelensky announcing that strikes in Donetsk region's Kurakov killed 10 civilians on Wednesday. The shelling in the Kurakov comes a day after Ukrainian artillery strikes killed 6 people in the Donetsk region's capital city of the same name, according to the Moscow-installed mayor. Meanwhile, U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price, asked about President Putin's remarks, declined to reply directly but said this.
Again, I'm just not going to get into our assessment. We think any loose talk of nuclear weapons is absolutely irresponsible. It flies in the face of the very statement that Russia formally signed on to in January of this year in the context of the UN Security Council. It flies in the face of the statement that we've heard from Russian officials even in recent weeks, reaffirming that very simple principle about a nuclear war.
Neither the U.S. nor Russia, by far the largest nuclear weapons powers, officially has a policy of no first use of the ultra-destructive arms. A recent U.S. posture review by President Joe Biden concluded only that nuclear weapons should only be used in extreme nuclear or extreme circumstances. Russia recently canceled talks on nuclear arms control scheduled in Cairo, accusing the U.S., which has sought to punish Russia over its invasion of Ukraine, of hostility. The Philippines joined the international community in its initiative to provide free and universal access to quality jabs against the COVID-19 and other vaccine-preventable diseases. According to Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs Yoon Dong-cho, the Korean government hosted a discussion as it actively contributes to building a free, peaceful, and more prosperous Indo-Pacific region as the region acts unitedly against the threats of COVID. Take a look.
Taking this opportunity, I would also like to thank the ASEAN Committee in Seoul for their continued support and dedication to ASEAN-Korean partnership. Over the years, we have witnessed remarkable growth in our cooperation, covering a wide range of areas. Specifically, ASEAN and Korea, together with our partners in the Indo-Pacific, made impressive achievements in public health and vaccine cooperation as we collectively respond to the challenges of the COVID-19. This valuable experience of solidarity and harmonized cooperation reinforced Korea's commitment for greater contribution in the region. It is in this context that President Yoon Suk-yeol announced Korea's first ever Indo-Pacific strategy last month at ASEAN-ROK Summit in Phnom Penh. Through greater engagement, Korea will actively contribute to building a free, peaceful, and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. At the same meeting, President Yoon also presented the Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative to emphasize ASEAN's central role in the Indo-Pacific and Korea's renewed commitment for enhanced partnership with ASEAN. Both the overarching Indo-Pacific strategy and ASEAN-tailored initiative emphasize the importance of solidarity with friends and partners in the region that share values and principles. It is therefore no surprise that key principles of Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy and Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative are well aligned with the underlying principle of ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. These include inclusiveness, trust, mutually beneficial cooperation, and above all, our common support for ASEAN centrality. The same principles are also found in the respective Indo-Pacific strategies of Australia and the United States. Indeed, this natural convergence of values and principles have provided us with a positive momentum for enhanced cooperation, not only between ASEAN and the ROK, but also among the dialogue partners in dealing with common challenges facing this region. In this regard, we are very pleased to be working together with Australia and the United States in strengthening regional vaccine cooperation for improved preparedness and resilience against future pandemics. These include inclusiveness, trust, mutually beneficial cooperation, and above all, our common support for ASEAN centrality. The same principles are also found in the respective Indo-Pacific strategies of Australia and the United States. Indeed, this natural convergence of values and principles have provided us with a positive momentum for enhanced cooperation, not only between ASEAN and the ROK, but also among the dialogue partners in dealing with common challenges facing this region. In this regard, we are very pleased to be working together with Australia and the United States in strengthening regional vaccine cooperation for improved preparedness and resilience against future pandemics. Over the past 3 years, we have experienced firsthand the importance of united action against the common threat of COVID-19. We have learned that effectiveness of joint response and the importance of equitable access to vaccines and treatment. Regionally, ASEAN quickly harnessed its collective effort and launched ASEAN COVID-19 Response Fund and the Regional Reserve of Medical Supplies, making a rapid region-wide response possible. ASEAN also took leadership in the region's recovery by adopting the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework. On a global level, various new mechanisms, including Act A, COVAX Facility, and the Financial Intermediary Fund, better known as the Pandemic Fund, were put into motion to bolster.
During the second Vaccine Cooperation Forum in the Indo-Pacific region, Philippine Ambassador to South Korea Maria Teresa Dizon de Vega also said the COVID-19 pandemic taught a lot of lessons and gave the Philippines the opportune time to engage with its partners in the region and worldwide. Founding CEO of Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, and Special Advisor to CEPI, Dr. Torre Godal, said the conference, which was organized by South Korea's Ministry of Foreign Affairs together with Australia and the U.S., is extremely important as it promotes and illustrates the importance of regionalization in terms of vaccine development and production in such a way regions can be independent when situation calls for it. As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And this is Alma Angeles reminding you to stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.